Hey everyone and welcome to SimpliCode's YouTube channel. And I hope you guys already know that we are covering every topic of JavaScript this week. We covered the basics of JavaScript and some introductory topics like variables, control statements and looping concept. In our last video, we covered topics like string methods and arrays and took a look at how constructors work in JavaScript. If you haven't checked out the first two parts, we highly recommend you to go through them before moving ahead. Today's session will focus more on finding HTML elements in JavaScript along with document object model manipulation. We see how we can take input from the users and learn about events, animation and drag-drop elements in JavaScript. Before we move forward though, do subscribe to SimpliCode and hit the bell icon to stay updated when we drop part 4 of this JavaScript full course series. So let's get started with today's session.
So today we are going to use a method that is somewhat similar to document.getElementById method. So we'll be using the document.getElementsByTagName method in JavaScript. As the name suggests, this method is used to access a bunch of similar elements with the same tag. So we have tag name in our method, right? So we can access a bunch of tags with similar name. Like if we have a few div tags present in our program and we want to change each div tag's style, we can do it with the help of this method. So we'll look at the syntax first and then we'll move on to the difference between ID and tag name methods. So let's move on to the programming part directly. What we'll do is we'll create a few div tags first and then we'll change the style of these div tags with specific styling properties. We are not going to use CSS for that, but in JavaScript we have other styling properties as well. So we'll be using those styling properties. So let's create the div tags first. We'll write here div and then let's say we are writing it, this is section 1. So we'll copy this line and we'll create 4 similar div tags, right? We have section 1, 2, 3 and 4. Save it and you can see over here we have 4 different sections present. Now this is a very basic example and here we have different sections present, right? Next up we'll try to access these div tags with the help of tag name method. So let's add a button over here and then we'll move on to the JavaScript part. So we'll write here, let's use the br tag and we'll write here input tag. Again we'll write a input type is equals to button and we'll use the onClick method as well. So we'll write here onClick and let's say our function name is fun2 and then we have the value of this button as, let's say, submit. Close the input tag and save it. So here you can see we have a button over here, submit button, and you can see here nothing is happening on clicking on this submit button. So next up what we are going to do is we are going to add functionality to this submit button. For that we have to move to our JavaScript file and we have to create a function over there. So we'll write here in the JavaScript file, we'll write here function fun2 and then we have the body of this function, right? So the syntax is a bit similar to that of the document.getElementById method. What we'll do here is we'll take a variable x and then we'll write here document.getElementsByTagName and then we'll write inside the brackets the name of tag we want to access, right? So here we have added 4 different div tags. So in this case we'll write here div and we can similarly access any of the tags present in a HTML document. We can access paragraph tags, we can access anchor tags and any tag we want to basically. So save it and here now we have a variable x that holds an HTML collection of all the div tags present inside the HTML file. This means that we have an array of references of all the div tags here inside this variable x. So if we try to make changes in a single array element, just like we did in the select box example, wherein we use the array index to access a particular element present at a particular array index, right? So we can do the same here. We'll write here x x, and then we'll write the index number. So this particular statement will access the element present at number 1, or this particular syntax will access the first div tag of HTML document, because we know arrays start from 0 and at 0 the first element will be present. So this div tag will be present at number 0. And then we are going to use the style property. So we know that x here is not a variable only. Actually x here acts as an object, and we know that different objects have certain properties in JavaScript. So style is one of those properties. And next up we'll write here, let's say, font family. So what we are doing is we are doing the CSS part with properties present in JavaScript. So let's say we are changing our font to Courier New. Fine. So this is a font name and we can use any font name over here. So save it. What will happen now is, on clicking the submit button, the font of this particular section, the font of div 1, will change to Courier New. So let's try if it's happening or not. So on clicking the submit button, you can see over here the change between this line and other 3 div tags. Clearly the font is changed. The new font is Courier New, and what we did here is we changed the font family of this particular div tag. So similarly we can make more styling changes to other div tags as well. So let's do it here, and we'll make changes to each of the div tags we have in a HTML file. So let's say here we are using the color property and we want to change the font color to blue. Fine. Then we'll do the same for element present at number 3. For that we'll write here x and the index number will be 2. So then again we'll use the style property, and then let's say we are writing here font style. Fine. And the font style we want it to be italic. And then finally we have one more property. Let's say for the last div tag we are using the background color. Fine. And we'll write here the color name is red. So we are good to go now. Save it, and we have 4 different properties over here. For section 4 we are changing the background color. So 3 will be the index number of the last array variable. So save it, and on pressing the submit button you can see the change over here. So for section 1 the font is changed to Courier New. For section 2 the font color is blue. Let me zoom it out a bit to show you guys. You can see over here the color is blue, and then we have italic text in section 3, and finally for section 4 we have the background color as 4, right? So you can see how we are accessing any particular element of the array. Now why we are using these properties separately for each array element? So if we try to make changes on each element of the array, we simply can't do it in JavaScript at once. So if we try to write here, so let's comment this out first. What we'll do is we'll write here x.style.font family. So basically what we want to do is we want to change the font family for all the div tags present, right? Because we know the variable x is holding an array of all the div tags present in a HTML file, right? So we'll save it, and you can see over here if we are clicking on this submit button, you can see nothing is happening. So if we go to our console, and you can see it over here that we have an error here. So it says it cannot set property font family of undefined. So this is the problem with this get elements by tag name method. To overcome this problem we have a solution as well. So the solution for this problem is we have to use the for loop here. So how this for loop works? So we'll write here for, and then we'll take a local variable I, and the initial value will be 0. Then we'll write here I less than x dot length, because we want to traverse the whole array, right? And then we'll write here the condition I plus plus. So we are good to go. Then we have this body of for loop, and inside here we'll write x, and the index number will be I, because it will keep on changing and we are in a loop. So we'll write here dot style, and then let's say the style we want to do is font weight. And what we want to do is we want to make our font bolder. Fine. So comment this line as well. Save it now, and you can see over here everything is clean. Now what will happen is on pressing the submit button, the font will change. The font weight will change basically. So let me zoom this, and if we click on this submit button, you can see the font is more bolder, right? So if we are using another property here, let's say the font we are using here background color, and we want the background color to be yellow. Fine. So save it, and on clicking the submit button, you can see the background color for all the div text for all the 4 section is changed to yellow. Fine. So this is how we can access all the elements of an array at once. Now what we did is we started a loop and traversed every element in the array and applied the same property to each element. So this is how we can do it with the help of tag name method in JavaScript. Now what if we have hundreds of similar elements like div tag present in our website, and all of them are present at different locations? So let's try to do it, and what we'll do is we'll insert certain different elements in between these div tags. Fine. So we'll include a form, and then we'll include some radio buttons, and anything we want to do, we can do it. So we'll add some more elements in between these div tags. So here you can see we have inserted 2-3 more elements in between these div tags. So save it, and you can see after each section we have something else. Here we have a form with 2 different text boxes. We have name and age, and then we have a submit button as well. Then after that we have section 2. So this is our section 2. Then after section 2 we have radio button, and the value is A. Then we have another radio button B, and in between we have all the div tags present. So basically what we want to do is we want to change the style for each of the div tags, right? So we will change the background color here. So let's say we'll write here red, and what will happen is on clicking the submit button, on clicking this submit button, what will happen is the background color of each div tag. So the background color for section 1, 2, 3 and 4 will change to red. So let's try to do it, and let's see if it's working or not. So we'll click on this submit button, and you can see it over here. We have all the div tags with background color as red. So this is working totally fine. One more thing we'll discuss before wrapping up this video is the uniqueness of ID attribute for each element. So we are saying this for a long time that the ID for each element should be unique. Why so? Although we saw in the past videos that we can use the same ID for 2 different elements when we did the same for accessing a CSS styling property using the ID attribute. But if we try to do the same thing with JavaScript, we'll get an error. For example, if we try to access the value of any particular element with the ID attribute, but we have 2 elements in a HTML file with the same ID. So it will throw an error in that case basically. And this is the reason why we use the tag name method in JavaScript, so that if we want to access multiple elements of the same name, we can do it with this method. Because it's not possible to use the ID method separately for each element present in the HTML document, right? Because we have certain same HTML tags present within an HTML document, like we have the div tags here. Similarly, a website is long enough to have multiple similar elements present within it. So that's why we use the document.getElements by tag name method in JavaScript. Before discussing the class name method in JavaScript, let's look at why accessing an element is important in JavaScript. So we know that the document object model is used to change, add or delete HTML elements. We saw earlier that we could change HTML elements or the CSS style of any element in the document with the help of JavaScript properties. So to make specific changes to those elements, we need to access them using particular methods. So we discussed 2 such methods before, the ID method and the tag name method, right? So let's move ahead and look at the class name method of accessing an element in JavaScript. As the name suggests, the main attribute in this method will be the class name. So we know the difference between the class and the ID attribute used in HTML. we know that ID has to be unique for each element, but we know that many elements in an HTML document can have the same class, right? So we used class to access specific CSS properties in the previous videos, and that is the only benefit of using classes in JavaScript. So we can say that a single class can be used by many elements within an HTML document. So let's dig a bit deeper into this concept. So let's say we have 5 elements present on our website and we want to make changes in 3 of these elements, right? So let's write the code here and it will be easier for you guys to understand. So we'll write here in the HTML file, we'll add 5 different elements. So let's say we are writing here div, and then inside this div we'll write this is section 1. We'll copy this, we'll paste it here. So we'll use 2 div elements and 2 paragraph elements, right? So here in this p tag we'll write this is section 3, and then we'll copy this line, paste it again, copy this one as well and paste it here. So we have section 1, section 2, 3, 4 and 5. So out of these 5 different elements, we have 3 div tags and we have 2 paragraph tags. So we'll discuss why we have taken 2 paragraph tags in between the div tags. So we are done with it. Here you can see we have 5 elements present in a HTML document. 3 of them are the div tags. Section 1, 2 and 5 are div tags, and 2 tags in between are the paragraph tags. So now let's suppose we want to change the style of 3 of these elements. Let's say 1, 4 and 5. So we can do it in 2 ways, right? Either we can use the ID method or we can use the class method. However, we can use the tag name method as well, but we have to use 2 different variables for that, right? That will be a lengthy process. Why 2 different variables? Because we have 2 different tags present here, right? We have to create separate variable for the div tag and separate one for the paragraph tag. So that will be a lengthy process. So we'll consider ID method and the class name method for here. So considering the ID method, the document.getElement by ID method, we have to provide unique ID to each element. So we have to provide unique ID to this div tag, then we have to provide to each and every element here, right? So because we need to access 3 of these elements, so at least we have to provide the ID to those 3 elements which we want to access, right? So in such cases we can use the class name method where we want to access more than one element but not all the elements in an HTML file. So we'll use the class attribute in each element we want to access. So let's say we want to access section 1, 2 and 5. So we'll write here class, let's say the class name is CLS1. We'll copy this, paste it here, and we are accessing 1, 2 and 4 because 1, 2 and 5 are the div tags. So we can access these with the help of tag name method as well. So we'll access 1, 2 and 4. Fine. So we have used the class attribute here. Next up, we'll create a button and then we'll add functionality to a HTML document. So let's create a button here. We'll again use input type is equals to button, and then we have on click, and on clicking it will call func1, and then we have the value as submit. Fine. So save it, and here you can see in the browser we have 5 sections over here. We have section 1, 2, 3, 4 and 5. Then we have a submit button which will call the function on clicking. So we haven't added functionality till now. So let's move ahead to our JavaScript file and we'll add functionality to a HTML document. So inside this JavaScript file, we'll write here function, and then we have the function name as func1. Then we have the body of this function. So the syntax remains a bit same. So we'll take a variable first and then we'll use the document method to take references of all the elements from a HTML file. So we'll write here where x is equals to document dot get elements by class name, right? And then we'll write the class name here. So the class name is cls1. Till now what we did was we took the references of all the required elements and stored them inside a variable named x in the form of an HTML collection. So now we can make changes to these elements, and what we'll do is we'll again use the style property to make styling changes in those three sections. So we have these three sections present inside an array, and we can access any one or all the three elements, right? So we'll write here x and then we'll provide the index number. So let's say we want to access section 1, that is the first div tag. So we'll provide the index number as 0. Then we'll write dot style, and this style is a property dot. Then let's say we want to change the font style. So we'll write here font style. Font style will be italic. Save it. So this piece of code will change the font style of the element present at index 0. Save it, and on clicking the submit button here on the browser, we can see the change in this section, right? So if it's not visible, so let me zoom it a bit for you. Here you can see, guys, the font at section 1 is changed to italic, right? So in this case we have all the three elements present in a array, and we can make changes to each of these elements. So let's try to do it, and we'll use element present at index 1 now. We'll copy this line and we'll paste it here again 2 times because we want to make changes to all the elements, right? We'll write here 2 and we'll write here 1. And let's say we want to change the font color for this one, and the font color will be blue. For this we'll change the font weight, let's say, and we want to make it bolder. So we'll write here bolder. Save it, and on clicking the submit button, you can see we have all the three sections with some minor changes. The first one is changed and we have italic over here. For the second one we have blue color as font color, and for the third one, which is section 4, we have the font weight as bolder. So you can see the change over here. So this is how we can make change to each element separately, and we can also make changes in all the elements at once as well. So for that we have to use the for loop, just like we did for the tag name method, right? So for that we'll write here, so let's comment these three statements first, and then we'll write here for, and we'll take a local variable here. We'll write here var I is equals to 0. I will start from index 0 and I will go till x dot length, and then we have the condition as I++. So inside the body of for loop we'll write here x, and instead of index number we'll write here I, because we want to traverse the whole array. Then we'll write here style dot, and let's say the style we want is background color. We want the background color to be, let's say, yellow. Fine. So this is how we can use the for loop. Save it, and we'll see on clicking the submit button on our browser, the background color for all the three sections, that is 1, 2 and 4, is changed to yellow. This is how we can use the document.getElementsBy class name method to access all the elements present in an HTML file with a particular class. Next up, let's discuss the difference between the ID method, tag name method and the class name method. So we'll discuss when to use which method. So let's start with the ID method. So the ID method is used when we want to access a single element, and we have to provide a unique ID to that element in order to access it. So the ID method is quite useful when we want to work on a single element. Apart from that, if we want to work on more than one element, we have two other methods. We can either use the class name method or the tag name method for more than one element. So the tag name method is also quite useful when we want to access elements with the same tag name. We can access all the similar tags present within an HTML document with the help of tag name method. The only problem is we can access similar types of tags only at one time. We can't access two different types of tags with this method. So this is where the class name method comes into play. We can access more than one element with this method, and the elements can be different. Just like we did here, we had div tag and paragraph tag, right? So the section 1, 2 and 5 are from div tags, and the section 4 and 3 are from the paragraph tags. So we can access two different tags with same class name with the help of class name method in JavaScript. So with this we came to the conclusion that more than one element in the HTML file can have the same class and can be accessed with the class name method. As we know, the document object model is simply the same HTML document with a different representation, right? The reason behind this diverse representation is that it's easy for JavaScript to interpret this format. JavaScript can't understand tags in an HTML document, but it can understand these objects. Therefore, JavaScript can easily manipulate these objects using different functions, which we'll discuss in today's video. So if you haven't watched the previous video on what is document object model, I'll suggest you to go through it before we move on to the DOM manipulation. In this tutorial, we will understand the basics of how we can use JavaScript while creating or working on a website. It's like a real-world application of JavaScript. In this particular video, we are going to discuss the window object present in JavaScript. We'll also see how we can take input from the user for some special tasks. So let's move ahead and discuss window object in JavaScript. A window object is actually a global object present in the client-side JavaScript that can be seen in a Chrome browser. Let's move on to the programming part directly, and it will be easy for you guys to understand. So let's write something on a console first to see if the JavaScript file is working fine or not. So we'll write on the console. We'll write here console.log. Let's say we are printing a string. We'll write here welcome to SimpliCode. Right. So we have to write here console.log and we are good to go. So save it, and here you can see we have the string in our console. So this means the browser is working fine. So let's create a variable now. Let's say we are creating a variable A, and we'll write here window, let's suppose, because we are talking about the window object today. Now we have written here window. Let's print this variable on a console first, and then we'll see further. So let's say we are writing here console.log and we are printing A on our console. Save it, and here you can see in the console that we have the window object here. And if we click on this object, see, we have a whole list of methods present here inside the window object. This window object actually works the same as the date object or the math object present in JavaScript. It also contains methods that are predefined in JavaScript to perform some specific tasks. So here you can see we have an alert method here, and we have many more methods, right? So we have alert, we have close, we have cookie store, and so many other methods as well. If we go down here, we can see we have the document method here as well. So this document method contains the URL of that HTML file and one can access it. If we copy it from here and if we paste it here in a new tab, so let's say we are pressing enter, and here you can see we have the same HTML document. We have window.html opened over here. So this document contains the URL of the HTML file and one can access it with the document method. Next up, we have two different ways of using the window object in JavaScript. Suppose if we want to use the alert method. So if we want to use the alert method, let's say we are writing here window.alert. This is the first way of using the alert method. Save it, and let's say we are providing a string here. Let's say hello everyone. Fine. So save it, and here you can see we have a pop-up in the browser saying hello everyone, right? So we have a pop-up here. If we remove the window keyword from this statement, like if we remove this window keyword from here, and if we say okay, and let's save this program again, and here you can see we have the same output again. So this is how we can use methods present within the window object in JavaScript. We can either write window dot the method name, or we can just write the method name. Both will work fine. Let's move ahead and talk about the prompt method. So guys, you might have noticed that we never took any input from the user till now. If we want to add two numbers, let's suppose, and we want the user to input those two numbers of the user's choice, we have to use the prompt method here to do so. So let's create a simple program that will take two inputs from the user and then it will print the output on the console or directly on the browser. So we have to create two variables to store the values given by the user. So let's say we are commenting these lines and we are creating two variables here. So let's say the first variable is var x and the next variable is var y. So we are not giving any values right now. So next up we'll use the prompt method in both the variables. So what we have to do is we have to write here prompt and we have to enter what we want to print on that particular prompt. So we'll write here, let's suppose, enter the value of x, and we'll do the same at y variable as well. So we'll copy it from here and we'll paste it here and we'll write here enter the value of y. One thing to keep in mind with prompt is whatever input prompt takes from the user, it takes the input as a string. Suppose we try to run this program. Okay, if we are trying to run this program, let's say we are writing here console.log and we are printing x plus y. So let's try to save it. So here you can see it says enter the value of x. So let's say we are entering 45 and then again we are entering 50. So we want the output as 95. The moment we will press OK, you can see here the output is 4550 because the input taken with the help of prompt method will always be a string. So if we want this to be a number, what we have to do here is we have to use the %. Right, I hope you guys are aware of this term %. It is used to change a string value to a number value. So we'll write here %. And we'll put it inside a bracket. So similarly we'll do the same for variable y as well. So now we can add two numbers without any problem. So let's save this program again, and here we have the prompt which says enter the value of x. So let's say the value of x is 50 again, and we'll press enter. Then let's say the value of y is again 45. Fine. The moment the user presses enter after inserting the desired value, like the moment we'll press enter, it will print the output as x plus y. So it will print 95 on the console. So let's see if it works. Press enter and here you can see we have the output as 95. So we can do one more thing here. We can print it on the browser as well. For that what we have to do is we have to write here document.write and we have to pass the values of x plus y. So let's save it now and let's enter the value as 45 and 50 again. So here you can see we have the output as 95 on our browser. So this method is working totally fine. We'll use these two methods again in other videos while manipulating an actual HTML document with JavaScript in the next video most probably. So we'll go through events and we'll see how interesting it is to use JavaScript along with HTML and CSS. So for now, let's move ahead and take a look at another method, that is the confirm method. We use this method when we want to provide the user with the choice of yes or no. It actually assigns a Boolean variable whose value can be either true or false, depending upon OK or cancel, whichever button the user is clicking. So let's see the confirm method as well. So what we'll do, we'll comment this and again say we have a variable a as window, right? So let's use this variable. So we'll write a equals to confirm and any string we want to print. So let's say we are writing a are you sure, or anything else you want to write. So let's write a console.log and we are printing the value of a. Fine. We have used console.log to print the value this confirm method returns to make it easy to understand. So let's save it and see here in the browser we have a pop-up with a message are you sure, and we have two options, right? We have OK and cancel. If we click here OK, So let's click here OK. You can see in the console we have the output as true. So and if we click cancel here, so you can see the output as false in the console. I hope you guys understood this. So till now we know about alert, prompt and confirm method. The fun part is we don't use these methods too much in general these days, because we have Bootstrap and CSS for doing these operations more efficiently these days. So we are going through these topics because these are the basic topics one should know while working on JavaScript. We should have knowledge about window object to understand how JavaScript is embedded with HTML to make beautiful and responsive web pages. Similarly, the document is also a part of this window object. Fine. So if we write here, let's comment this as well. And let's say if we write here, we have a variable A. Let's copy it from here and we'll paste it here. So let's say we have a variable A and we'll write here window.document. Fine. Next up, we'll print variable A on a console. So we'll write here console.log and we'll print the variable A. If we save it now, and here you can see we have the whole document here in the console. So if we click here, you can see we have the whole document. We have all the tags here. We have head tag, we have body tag, and even we have the script tag as well. So whatever tag we had in our HTML documents, all these tags are written over here. Basically the entire document is here, right? So we'll go through DOM manipulation as well. We'll make changes to a particular HTML document. For now, one thing I want you guys to focus on is the window object. Next up, let's talk about the window's inner width and inner height. So if we write here in the window.js, if we write here window, let's say window.inner height. So save it, and here you can see we have the height as 149. Now if we try to make changes in the size of Chrome, let's say if we try to change this size here and let's refresh it, see here we have the output as 100. Let's change it again and refresh it. Again we can see the output as 111, and let's do it once more. So here you can see we have the output as 144. Now similarly we can use inner width as well. So if we write here inner width and save it, here you can see we have the output as 335. So if we change the width of this particular document and refresh it, here you can see the output is also changed to 564. So these are the two methods, the inner height and the inner width. We might use them in further videos. Similarly, we have many more methods present within the window object to perform specific tasks. We have the location, we have scrollX method, we have scrollY, which works the same as inner width and inner height. You can go through all these methods. For that you have to write here variable A and window. So save it now, and here you can see we have all the methods present here. So these all are the methods we have present within the window object. So there are more than 100 methods present here, or maybe more than 200 or 300 methods. If you scroll down, you can see we have a number of methods present here. You can go through any of these methods. So you guys can use them by yourself, or we'll discuss the important ones whenever we need them. This was a brief intro to document object model manipulation. In this video, we'll start with some DOM manipulations, and later on we'll be taking a look at the document.getElementById method. By now, we have come a long way from where we began. Now we know functions, we know classes, data types, and almost every basic concept one needs to know while working on JavaScript. We know the functioning of document object model, right? We know that DOM is an API that helps JavaScript understand what is there written inside the HTML document. So DOM defines the whole HTML document in a hierarchical form to make it understandable for JavaScript, so that other JavaScript functions can work over it, right? So by far we have a lot of theoretical information about the document object model in JavaScript. We also came across the window object present in JavaScript, and we know about methods, right? But we never used JavaScript to manipulate DOM on any HTML documents. So today we are going to start the video with the DOM manipulation. So in this video we are going to add some functionality to our web page. This means that today we are working on a little bit of HTML as well. So let's move on to the programming part and we'll see how we can manipulate a basic design of a web page, and we'll try to manipulate it with DOM. So adding functionality to a web page refers to doing tasks like we want to perform validations or having few text boxes for a phone number or account number. So let's say we want only numbers to be there inside these boxes, or we don't want them blank, or any other functionality we want to add. Then we can use JavaScript. So talking about HTML, let's do one thing here. We'll create a button with the help of button tag, and we already have this heading with the h2 tag here, right? So we have this heading DOM manipulation part 2. So it is printed on our browser as well. Now what we'll do is we'll create a button. So let's create an empty button first. So what we have to do here is we have to write in this HTML document, we have to use the button tag, and let's say the button name will be click here. Fine. So here we are. We have created a button, save it, and here you can see we have a button named click here. Now talking about events, we have many events present in HTML. Like if we are clicking on this button, so this is an event. So if we click here, for now we can see nothing is happening over here. Similarly, we have many standard events present in HTML like click events, scrolling events. So if we want to change the focus from one text box to another, or we are dragging some text or selecting something or double clicking on it as well. What if we target these particular events to perform specific actions with the help of JavaScript? So these events are basically the methods present within the window object. Just like the onClick method, we have the onClick method in window object, right? So we can use onClick method to perform some specific task here. So we'll see how we can use onClick method here. For example, let's say we want this button to perform a specific task when we click on it. Right now, if we click on this button, we can see nothing is happening over here. So let's say we want to show an alert message on clicking over this button. So the flow of this click will be like, if we click here on this button, then something in the JavaScript code has to register this activity and perform some specific task like a pop-up alert message or some sort of other messages. So we have been through the alert method present within the window object in the last video. So let's suppose we want a pop-up when the user clicks on this button. So what is going to happen is when we click over here, where we want a pop-up on our screen with a message written over there. So let's say we want an alert with the message welcome to SimpliCode, right? We can do it in JavaScript with the help of functions. We already know functions, right? So functions are statements we use to perform some specific task. We can call them anytime. Here in this case, if we want to embed JavaScript within an HTML document, then what we have to do is we have to use a window object method or event, we can say, to call a function on clicking the button. So we have to use the onClick event. So let's try to do it. What we'll do is we'll write here button, and over here we'll write onClick. So here you can see we have other methods, or we can say other events as well. We have onCanPlay, we have onDoubleClick, we have onScroll. So we can use any of them. So for now, let's suppose we are using onClick and we want to map it to the JavaScript document. So we can do it with the help of functions. So let's create a function first. So what we'll do, we'll go to the .js file and we'll create a function here. So let's say we are creating a function named function, let's say button, and then we have the opening and closing round brackets and the body of the function. So we want this function to return a pop-up with the message welcome to SimpliCode, right? So we'll write here alert. So I hope you guys are aware of this alert term because we have been through it in the last video. So we'll write here alert welcome to SimpliCode and we'll save it. So if we call this function over here only, so what we have to do is let's see if this function is working fine or not. So we'll write here button and we'll call it. So save it now. And if we refresh this, so here you can see we have a pop-up with the message welcome to SimpliCode. So this function is working totally fine. We can use this function with the HTML document as well. All we have to do is we have to write the function name after the onClick event. So we'll comment this statement here and we'll go back to our HTML file and we'll write the name of a function here. So our function name was button, and here we have our function. So save it, and here on the browser, if we click on this button, so we can see the output as a pop-up with the message welcome to SimpliCode. What it will do is it will automatically call the function when the user presses the button. So this is how we can map events in JavaScript. We'll do so many such things in upcoming videos, like changing the style of text and the on mouse over effect we have in JavaScript. We'll also go through it, and we'll see many more such events in further videos. So this is just an example of what is yet to come. So let's move on and talk about the getElementById method. So let's say we don't want this pop-up on click. What we want to do is we want to change this heading here. So you can see here we have the heading as DOM manipulation part 2. We want to replace this text with something else on the button click. So the function will remain the same. What we'll change is we'll change the body of this function. So instead of writing here alert, what we'll do is we'll use the ID now. So what we'll do first is we'll provide ID to this heading tag. So let's say this heading tag has the ID named as heading. So we have the ID heading for this head h2 tag. So what we'll do here is we'll write here document. So as you guys know, document is also a method present within the window object, right? So we'll write here document.getElementById and we'll pass the ID we want to use. So here in this particular case we want to use this ID heading, so we'll pass heading over here. So we'll copy it from here and we'll paste it here. Fine. Then we have the .inner HTML property. So here in this case we want to take reference to the object h2. So we know h2 acts as an object in the document object model, right? So we can use it to take the reference of this object, and also all the objects do have some properties, right? So the .inner HTML here is the property of object h2, and it will hold the value written inside the h2 tag. So the .inner HTML property holds the value DOM manipulation part 2. So what we want to do next is we want to change this text to something else, right? So if we want to write here something else, so let's say we want to write here subscribe to SimpliCode. Fine. So let's say this is the string we want to print here on clicking the button. So we want to change this text to subscribe to SimpliCode. Although if we save it now, we don't see any change now. That's because we want the text to change on button click. So if we click on this button now, here you can see the text is changed. So similarly, we can do a lot many things with this now. For example, we can store this value inside our own variable. So what we have to do here is we have to write here var c is equal to, and now this var c will hold the value returned by this statement. Next up, what we'll do is we'll use the alert method and we'll write here c. So what it will do is it will take the value, so var c will hold the value DOM manipulation part 2, and next up this value will be printed on the pop-up here. So let's save it now, and if we click here, we can see here we have the pop-up with message DOM manipulation part 2. So we can use this .inner HTML method to get the string present inside the h2 object, and we can also use the alert method with this variable then. So there are many more ways to access the elements. The document.getElementById method is just one of them. In this video, we will create a website layout and make changes in that layout using the document object model. Today, we are going to work with HTML as well and a little bit of CSS. So we are going to use multiple tags from HTML and we are going to use CSS for styling those tags. So for now, I hope you guys must have a clear understanding of tags in HTML and styling as well. So let's move ahead, and we are going to use the div tag first. We are going to make few sections of a particular section, and then we are going to use CSS for styling those div tags. So let's use the div tags first. So what we are going to do is we are going to create a particular section for all the div tags in the HTML document. So we are going to write here div, and then inside this div we are again going to create some more sections. So we'll write here div, and then we'll write here this is section 1. Similarly, we are going to create few more sections inside this div tag. Then we'll copy paste it and we'll change the names for these sections. So we'll save it now, and here you can see we have 3 sections. We have section 1, 2 and 3. If we go to element and if we try to check the area covered by these div tags, so we can go here and we can see this is the area which is highlighted right now. This is the area covered by a particular div tag. So we have a div tag, then inside that div tag we have 3 more div tags present, right? So we have section 1, 2 and 3 here. Now we are going to use the concept of class and IDs as well. So we'll write here class is equals to, and let's say the class for this div tag is left. Then again for this div tag, let's say the class is right. And then lastly the class will be, let's say, center, right? So we have 3 different classes here as well. Now if we save it, we don't see any particular change for now, but if we try to use CSS here, so what we have to do is we have to use the style tag, and inside this style tag we have to define the properties for particular classes. So for class left, let's say the property is background color, and let's say the background color will be crimson. Fine. Next up we have the class as right, and for right the background color will be, let's say, dark blue. And then we have another class here as well which is center. So for class center the background color will be, let's say, gold. Fine, save it now, and now here you can see we have all the 3 sections with different background colors. This is section 1, so this particular section has the background as crimson. Then we have section 2 with background as blue, and then we have section 3 with background as gold, right? I hope you guys are clear with this concept of class till now. Next up, I hope you guys are already aware of this difference between class and ID, but let's go through this concept quickly. So whenever we want to make changes in multiple elements in our program, we use class. For example, if we want to use the crimson color as the background color for section 4, and let's say we want to use the gold color as background color for section 5. So what we are going to do is we are going to create 2 more sections, and the section 4 will inherit the properties of class left, and the section 5 will inherit it from class center. So let's do it. We'll create here 2 more div. So we'll copy it and we'll paste it here, and again we'll paste it here. We'll change the names as 4 and 5 and the classes as well. So the class of section 4 will be left and the class of section 5 will be center. So let's save it. You can see here we have 2 more div, or we can say we have 2 more sections present over here. We have section 4 and we have section 5 over here, right? Now if we talk about section 4, we can use 2 classes here, right? So you can see for now we have only 1 class over here. We can use another class over here. So let's say we are using a class named size. So for now we don't have any class with name size. So this is the syntax of how we can use 2 different classes within a single element. All we have to do is we have to put space between these 2 classes and we are good to go. So let's define this class here. So we have to define the class size here. So we'll write here dot size, and let's say we want the font size to be smaller. So let's save it. Here you can see the font size of this particular div tag is changed. the font is a bit smaller when compared to other fonts over here. And if you want to do something more, like if you want to make it bolder, you can do it, or any other thing you want to do, you can do it with the help of CSS. So on the other hand, the ID attribute specifies a unique property or a unique section. So using the ID attribute, we can identify a unique element. So as you know, we can use ID with document.getElementById. Basically, that is the only reason we say that ID has to be unique. Otherwise, there's no problem if you are using ID for two different elements. If you are using the same ID for two different elements. Let me show it to you with the help of an example. So here in this particular section, in this section 4, we are going to use the ID attribute as well. So we are going to name this ID as 1. Save it now, and we have to define the ID here as well. So for that we have to use hash, and then we have to use the ID name. So let's say this will change the font weight. Fine. So it will make it bolder. So let's save it now, and here you can see this is section 4 is a little bit thicker than other sections. So if we want to use this same ID for any other element, right, we can do it. There's no problem with that. Let me show you guys. So if we write a ID as 1, and if we save this program now, here you can see there's no error with that. We can use this ID for section 1 as well. So it's not necessary that the ID should be unique for every element of the website, but it has to be unique because we can use ID for manipulating a web page, right? We can use it with document.getElementById. So that's why we prefer to keep the ID unique for every element inside a HTML document. So I hope you guys are clear with the difference between class and ID by now. The major difference is class is used for multiple targets, whereas we use ID uniquely for each element. We want the ID to be unique. So that's the difference between class and ID. Moving ahead, let's talk about the document object model. So what we are going to do now is we'll go to the JavaScript file, and we are going to see the document object model now. By now, we are aware of the document object model, right? We are aware of the window object. We are aware of the document object. We have already came across these two objects in the previous video. So what we are going to do is we are going to write here var x. We are declaring a variable x, and we'll write here document. So we already did this in the previous video. So what we are going to do is we are going to write here console.log, and we are going to print x on a console. So save it, and if we go to console, here you can see we have the document here, or we can say we have the document object model for the whole document, for the whole HTML document. We know that the DOM is a structural representation of HTML document. So we have here HTML tag, we have head, body, and almost every tag we have here, right? You can see we have script here, we have div here, we have all the div tags present here. Now we know that the document is also an object like any other object, right? We already discussed it. It also has its own attributes and properties as well. So next up, you guys can see we have here a fundamental website, right? So this is a website basically. What we have here is we have 5 different sections, and we have a heading here as well, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to work on it with the help of document object model. So we can use CSS to make changes to the syntax like we used previously while creating divisions of our web page. But for now, let's focus upon the JavaScript part more. So in JavaScript, we can write code that will help us in manipulating the document object model. So this document object model has a tree-like structure with HTML tag at the top. Then we have head and body tag, and then we have all the tags present inside them in a branch-like structure. We are aware of this, right? If we see here in the console, we have a document, and if we try to open it, we can see we have HTML head and many more tags present within all these significant tags. Next up, if we write here document.all instead of document, so if we save it now, here you can see we have the HTML collection of all the tags with numbers in front of them. So here you can see we have HTML head and then body tag, and here you can see especially we have the classes as well here. Not just classes, we have the IDs as well. So here you can see we have div1 here as well. So this is the HTML collection of all the tags we have in a HTML document, and we can check it with the help of document.all property. Now suppose we want to access a particular segment in this program or in this document. We want to access elements present within the head tag, let's say, or within the body tag. In that case, we have to write a statement that goes like this. So instead of document.all, we'll write here document.head. Save it, and here you can see we have the head segment of this particular document with all the tags over here. So here you can see we have meta tags and title tags only, because till now we haven't added any particular tag in the head section of a HTML document. So let's do one thing, let's try to access the body tag. We'll write here document.body and save it. So here you can see we have the body of our HTML document here with all the tags. So here you can see we have the CSS file as well. We have background color for each class, and then we have the ID as well. So this is how you can access a particular segment of your HTML document with the help of JavaScript. Next up, sometimes it may happen that we may include forms in our website and later we want to access them in our console. So in JavaScript, we have a method for that also. So what we have to do is we have to write here document.forms. So we'll remove body from here and we'll write here forms. Save it. As you can see, we have an HTML collection of forms, but we have no form for now in a HTML document, so it's showing 0. So let's do one thing, let's add a form over here. So we'll write here form, and so let's say our form will take 3 values. So it will take name, age, and then we have a submit button, right? So we'll write here name, then we'll write here input type is equals to text, and then we have name is equals to name. Fine. Next up we have the age. So we'll write here age input type is equals to number and name is equals to age, right? Then finally we have the submit button. Fine. So we'll write here input type is equals to button, and then we have value as submit, let's say. Save it, and here you can see we have name, age, and submit. So let's do one thing, let's add the break tag or BR tag here. We'll do it here as well. Save it, and now you can see we have name, age, and submit. So this is basically a form. If we go to elements and if we go to a form, you can see we have the form highlighted over here. It consists of 3 different properties. It has name, it has age, and then it has a button, a submit button basically. So obviously it will not work fine for now because we haven't added any functionality till now. So we'll discuss about it in later videos. So for now our main purpose is to access this form with the help of JavaScript. We'll go back to our JavaScript file. We'll save it again, and now if we click over here, you can see we have a form present over here. We have 0 and then we have form written over here, right? So we can see we have input and then we have the properties of this particular form and all of this stuff. So you can see we have a form present over here, or we can access a form with the help of JavaScript. So now let's say we have a scenario where we have 4 different forms and we want to access form 3 from them. So what we have to do in that case is we have to write here document.forms and we have to provide the form number. So as you know, as you can see here, the form number starts from 0. So for form number 3, the number will be 2. Fine. So if we save it now, it will show an error because obviously we don't have any forms over here till now. So we have added only 1 form, but it will work fine if you try to do it with more than 1 forms. So this is how you can access forms with the help of JavaScript. Next up, we'll try to access images as well. So if you have added any image in your HTML document, you can also access it with the help of JavaScript. So what we are going to do is we are going to add an image over here. So let's do it first. We'll write here img, then we have the image source as simplicode.png, and then we have the alt. So we'll write here SimpliCode. Right, so we have added an image here. Save it, and here you can see we have the image, but the image is quite large, right? So what we are going to do is we are going to use CSS in this case. We'll write here id, and let's suppose the id is 2, right? We have used 1 already, so we'll write here 2. We'll go to our CSS file, we'll write here. So the property we'll write here is max width and max height. So max height, let's say, will be 50%, and then we have max width as well. So let's say the width is also 50%. Save it, and here you can see the image is fine now. So we have added this image over here. The main motive is to access this image with the help of JavaScript, right? So we'll go to a JavaScript file. Instead of document.form, so we'll write here document.images, and we'll save it. So here you can see we have HTML collection with image here. If you noticed here, you can see we have the image with the ID as well. So you can see here 2 is written over here after the img. So this is the image, and we can access it with the help of JavaScript. We can access as many images as we want with the help of JavaScript. So for now we have added only a single image. You can do it with the help of more than 1 images. Next up, just like we can access images, we can access forms, we can access the body segment, the head segment, everything of an HTML document. Similarly, we can access the links as well, we can access scripts as well. So for that we have to make minor changes over here. We have to write, instead of document.images, we have to write either document.links or document.scripts. So the syntax will remain same. All we have to do is we have to write here scripts or links or images, whatever we want to access with the help of JavaScript, we have to write it over here. So I want you guys to check it with the help of links and scripts. Before we look at the DOM traversing in JavaScript, let's discuss another small yet interesting method in JavaScript, that is the query selector method. This query selector method in JavaScript helps the user to get the first element from the document with a particular query. As the name suggests, it will return the first element related to that query. Suppose we see here in the previous code, so we are using the previous code, the one which we used in the previous video. So we are going to use the same code. So we can see here we have an element with class left here, right? So this is a class left, and the element with class left is this div is here with class left. Fine. In fact, we have more than one element with class left, right? So this div also has the class left. Now, if we want to find the first element with class left, in that case, we can use the query selector method. So it will return this div tag in the console, or wherever we want to print it, it will return this div tag there. So let's implement this in coding. So we'll go to the JavaScript file, and let's suppose we want to access a particular element, or we can say the first element with the class is left. Okay, so let's remove this, and we'll write here var x is equal to document. It's quite similar to what we studied in the last video, like we did for forms and all. So what we have to do here is we have to write here x equals to document dot query selector, and then we have to pass the class name here. Instead of class name, we can pass the element name as well, we can pass the ID as well. So in this particular case, we are going to pass the class name. So we'll write here dot left. So this is our class name, and then we'll print this x on the console. So we'll write here console.log, and we'll print x here. So the syntax is quite simple for the query selector method. Let's save it and check the output. So you can see here that in the output we have null here, right? So it may happen to some of you guys that it will show null here in the console. Every one of you or me doesn't need to have to go through it. Like, it happens mostly when we try to access the element before the document object model is ready. So you may have encountered a similar situation earlier in the last video when you try to access a particular form in the document using numbers. Like we were using there, we were writing there, we were doing is we were accessing a particular form. So this will give an error, right? Save it, and here you can see it says undefined as well. So this is the problem. This is because the document object model is still not ready. So we can tackle this problem in two ways. We can use the onload method, and the other one is we can use the DOM content load event. So for now, we'll use the onload method because that method is a bit easier than the other one. So what we have to do is we have to create a function in our JS file. So we'll create a function here. Let's say we are creating a function 1s. Fine. And we have the body of the function. So what we are going to do is we are going to cut this from here and we are going to paste it inside the function. Fine. So you can see here we have a function 1s, and now what we are going to do is we are going to call this function from our HTML file, right? So we are going to call this function along with the onload event. So we'll go to a HTML file and we'll write here along with the body tag. We'll use onload method and we'll write here a function name. Fine. So this is our function name 1s. This onload event executes the JavaScript code right after the web page is completely loaded. Save it now, and here you can see we have the output for the query selector method, or you can see we have the output for the document.forms, right? We have the form present at number 1. So issue is solved now. So what we are going to do is we are going to remove this line from here, and now we'll go back to our query selector method. So save it again, and here you can see we have the query here, right? We have the output as div class equals to left, and then we have id1. So we have this particular element here, right? So this is how we can use the query selector method in JavaScript to access any particular query or to search any particular query. Moving ahead, let's talk about traversing the document object model in JavaScript. In layman terms, traversing refers to crossing or traveling through something, right? In JavaScript, we can traverse a document object model to find some specific element from the document. We know that DOM has a tree-like structure with parent and child nodes, right? Traversing a DOM is important because sometimes we need to locate or modify a particular element, but there may exist a possibility that the code is too long, or we don't want to search for that specific element by going through every element present in the document. So that's where we can use the DOM traversing method to find a particular component. So let's understand the concept of root node, parent element and child element. So here in this structure, you can see we have several nodes present, right? So the first node we are going to discuss is the root node. So this HTML tag is actually the root node, which has no parent and it has children's, right? So this HTML tag is also a parent node. Another example for parent node is the body tag. So you can see here we have so many children's along with the body tag. We have h1 div and we have div id equals to div2. We have two div tags. We have an h1 tag, and similarly head is also a parent node as well as a child node. A child node to this HTML and a parent node to title, right? So the HTML tag has two children which are head and body. The head is the first child and the body is the last one. Here you can see we have the h1 tag, and this h1 tag is the child node of body tag. So these all are the child nodes. We have h1 div and then we have another div and title. They all are the child nodes. Similarly, these div elements are also parent elements to these two child elements, right? The document object model in JavaScript can be traversed in two different directions, either in downward direction or in upwards direction. It's not necessary that traversing the DOM should start from the beginning or from the end. We can begin traversing from wherever we want, and it can be random. All we need to know before starting is the class name, or we can say element name or something like that related to that particular element which we want to find. So traversing downwards means we want to find the element while coming towards the downward direction. So we have two different methods in JavaScript to traverse the DOM downwards. So we can either use the query selector method, which we came across moments ago. The other one is we can use the children property, so which helps us in find the direct descendants of an element. So let's move ahead and take a look at both these methods with the help of examples. Till now we were using document.querySelector method to find something in our document, right? Now we will use querySelector along with the variable name to find a specific element inside a parent element. So let's do one thing. We'll go to our HTML file, and what we'll do, we'll give this div tag a class. So let's say we are using a class here and the class name is container. We didn't define this class as of now, but we are using this class for this particular div tag. Fine. Now we want to find a particular element inside this particular div tag. For that we have to take two variables, right? So we'll go back to our JavaScript file and we'll remove this code. We'll take two variables, let's say var x, and we have var y. Fine. So for var x we'll use the document.querySelector method, and we'll write here the class name. So the class name for the parent div is container, right? And for variable y we'll write here x.querySelector. So one thing you might have noticed here is we have used the variable name, right? So we are looking for a particular element inside this particular div tag. So we have identified this div tag with the help of class name. So the class name is container, and now we are looking for a particular element inside this div tag. So let's say we want to find the element with classes right here. So we'll write here dot write. So this is our class name. So next up we are going to print the element on a console. So we'll write here console.log y, and when we save it, you can see here we have the first element with class right. So we have this div tag here inside which it is written that this is section 2. So you can see here we have the first element present with the class right. So this method so far has helped us in traversing the DOM in a downward direction. Firstly, we found a parent node, and then we started looking for the child node in a downward direction from that element. So with the help of this method, we can find any element present within an element in the tree-like hierarchy. So if we use this method for body tag and then we want to find the element with class right, although the element with the class right is not a direct descendant of the body tag, right? So if we go back to our HTML page, so you can see here if we are using any class here inside the body tag and we want to find the element with class right, so we can see this is not a direct descendant of body tag. Instead it is a direct descendant of this particular div tag, right? So we can still find it with the help of this query selector method. But what if we want to see the direct descendant to a particular node? So for that we can use children property in JavaScript. So we can see here that this particular div tag has 5 different sections present within it, right? So we have this div tag and then we have 5 different div tags basically. So you can see this is section 1, 2, 3, then 4, and lastly 5. So we'll try to access these 5 elements now with the help of children property. So for that we'll go back to our JavaScript file and we'll write in our JavaScript file. We'll copy this statement from here and we'll write it in another line so that it won't create any confusion to you guys. So what we have to do here is we have to remove this from here and we have to find the children of X. So what's there inside X? We have the div tag, the parent div tag inside this X, right? And we want to find the children of this div tag. So we'll save it and you can see we have an HTML collection of 7 length. And you can see here the length has 7 and we have all the elements here. We have div 1 and then we have div 2, 3, 4, 5 and then we have form and image as well, because form and image is also present inside this particular div tag. So we have all the elements present here of this particular parent div tag. This children property returns the elements only. If we write here instead of children, if we write here child nodes, so let's do it and check the output first. So we have written here child nodes, save it, And here you can see it returns a node list of 15 elements, right? But one thing to notice here is this text is printed almost after every element, right? So you can see text here, then we have text here, then we have text here, and we have text almost after every element, right? Why so? Because this method also publishes the new line. So suppose if we are using the new line, if we are using a new line in our code, it will publish that as well. And let's suppose we want to write a comment over here. So let's go here to a HTML file and write a comment over here. So where we'll write the comment, we'll write the comment here. Fine. So we'll write a comment here. So let's say we'll write here, this is a comment. Fine. So we have commented this line and save it. So you can see the size changed to 17, right? Because it says there are 2 more lines added to our code. So you can, if you see here, you can see here we have a comment here as well, and we have a text added here as well because of this new line. So it will take this as a new line and it will print it as text. So this is how the child nodes is different from the children. So if we want to compare them side by side, what we can do is we'll write here console.log and we'll print x.children. Fine. So save it, and here you can see we have a node list of 17 elements and a HTML collection of 7 elements. The difference is the children property focuses on elements only, whereas the child nodes property will print everything inside a node. Next up, we can access a particular element from the list of all children's. So the syntax will be the same as for forms. If you remember from the previous videos, we can access any form from the HTML file by using numbers, right? Form presented number 1 will be treated as forms 0 and then so on and so on. So we'll write here, let's say children at number 4. So save it. And you can see here we have the output as this is section 5. So we don't know. So let's do one thing. We'll copy this line and we'll paste it here. We'll print the children's as well basically. Save it. And here you can see we have all the children's here. So this particular statement will print the element present at number 4. So you can see here we have this div tag here with class as center. So it will be printed in a console. So you can see here it says this is section 5. Fine. Similarly, just like we have the children and child nodes property, we have few more properties here. We have the first child, first element child, last child and last element child properties, which returns the first and last child and elements. So let's use them as well. So what we are going to do is we are going to remove this. We are going to write here console.log and x.firstChild. Fine, copy this and we'll paste it again and again. So the next one is first element child, and then we have last child, and finally we have last element child. Fine, so we are good to go. The first child, then we have first element child, then we have last child and last element child. Save it. And here you can see the first one says text and the third one says text, and the other two are presenting the elements present at number 1 and present at number last. So the first child and last child properties works on the child node property, and it returns the first and last child according to the property only. The first element child and last element child property works on the children property. So we know the difference. The children property focuses on elements only, whereas the child node property shows everything inside that nodes, right? So that's why the output here is text for first child and last child, and for first element child and last element childs we have two different elements present here, right? We have an image element and the div element. We can also count the number of child elements present within a single node. we have to use the child element count property for doing so. So let's use it as well, and we'll write here console.log, and we'll write here x.child element count. Fine, save it, and we have the output here as 7. This property is also working on the basis of children property. Fine, so you can see here we have the length as 7. As we have seen earlier, while using the children property, the length is 7 there as well. Like we can find the child element of a particular node, we can also find the parent element. So the syntax remains the same, and we have to use the parent element property to find the parent of any element. So what we are going to do is we are going to find the parent of this particular div tag. We have the parent div tag, right, with class container. So we are going to find the parent for this particular div tag. So what we are going to do is we are going to write here console.log and x.parent element. So save it, and here you can see we have the parent as the body tag here. Here you can see we have body, onload, and then we have function name, and whatever is there inside the body tag, we have it all here. Fine. So this line gave us the parent element of this particular div tag with class container. Now we can use this method to find the parent of any element, or we can use the parent node property as well. The output will remain the same in both cases, because any child node in the document can have one parent only, right? So this is known as traversing in upward direction. Now, before we end this video, let me guys take you through another concept in this particular topic. We can also access the siblings of a specific element. So like a parent, div here has so many children, right? We have 5 children for the div tag, not 5, we have 6, and then we have 7 children. So because we have 7 tags present here inside the div tag, inside this particular div tag, right? So we can access the siblings of a particular child. Let's suppose if we want to access the siblings of this particular child, right? We want to access the siblings. So the siblings are, the immediate left sibling will be this one, and the immediate next sibling or the right sibling will be this one. So what we have to do to access the siblings of these elements is we have to write here, instead of document.query selector, we have to write here center, right? Because we want to access the siblings of this particular div tag, right? So what we'll do next is we'll write here console.log, and then we have to write here x.next element sibling for the next one, and we have to write here console.log x.previous. So we can find the previous element sibling as well. And now what we have to do is save it, and here you can see we have 2 different div tags present here, one with class left and the other one is one with class right. So if we go back to our HTML file, we can see here we have the div with class left as the next element present to this particular element, and the div with class right as the previous element of this particular element with class center, right?
We are going to take input from the user with the help of a text box in JavaScript. What we'll do is we'll create a text box, and any value the user will write inside the text box will be stored in a variable, and then we will print that variable in a message using the alert method or in the console. So whatever we want to do, we can do it. So let's create a small login page with no styling, because we'll be focusing more on the HTML and the JavaScript parts. So for that we have to go to our HTML file. So here's a HTML file, and we'll write here input, and then we'll write here type is equals to name, and then we'll write here placeholder is equals to, let's say, enter name. This placeholder is an attribute that gives a slight hint. Whatever value we write here will be printed inside the box. So this enter name will be printed inside this particular text box. So save it, and here you can see on the browser we have a text box here.
Here you can see how this value is written inside the text box. You can see here enter name is written inside a text box, indicating the user to write the name here. So let's create another text box here for the password. So we are creating a login page, right? So we'll be needing name and password. So we'll use the br tag here, and then we'll write here input type is equals to password, and then we'll use a placeholder here and we'll write here enter password. This type attribute here plays a vital role on this input element because we have different types of values we can use inside a text box, like we have numbers, strings, week, time, email, password, and many more. So here we are using password. So save it, and you can see here we have two text boxes over here in the browser. So we have a text box for name and we have a text box for password. Next up, we need a button to perform a task, right? So we'll use the onClick method along with this button. We can either use the button tag or we can use the input tag along with type is equals to button. So we'll write here input type is equals to button, and the value will be, say, submit, or we can write here login as well. Save it, and here you can see we have a button over here named as submit. So we are done with the login setup here. We have a text box for the name and one for the password. So we'll write any name here. You can see, let's write here Kaushal, and then we'll write the password here, let's say any random password, and nothing will happen if we click on this submit button. So let's add some functionality to this submit button here. So we'll go back to a HTML file and we'll write here on click. So we'll write here a function name print. Fine. We'll create this print function now. So we'll go to a JavaScript file and we'll create a function here. So let's say function name is print, and then we have the body of the function. Now this function will be called whenever we click on this button. So whenever we click on this submit button, this print function will be called. Now we want this button to do something, right? We want it to perform a certain task. What we want to do is we want the user to write their name and password, and we will print this name and password in the pop-up with the help of alert method. So we'll use the document.getElementById method for this task. Let's give those elements their IDs. So we'll give these two input tags their IDs. So we'll write here ID is equals to, let's say, uname or username, and then we have the password. For password we'll give the ID as upass. Fine, save it, and then we'll go back to a JavaScript file. Now both these elements have their own IDs. We'll use them in the JavaScript file. So we want to use the values given by the user, right? For that, we'll create two variables here inside the function print to hold the reference of original values. So for that, we'll write here where x is equals to document.getElementById, and then we have the ID as uname for the username, and then we'll write here dot value. Next up, we'll take another variable, let's say where y, and then we'll write here document.getElementById again. Then we have the ID as upass. We'll write here dot value. Now what we did here is we use the IDs to get the reference of those values which the user will input. You might have noticed here that we have used the value property here after the IDs. So this value property returns the value attribute of any text box. So now we have the values here present inside variables x and variable y. The next thing we want to do is we want to print these values, right? So for that we'll use the alert method. So it's quite easy to use. We'll write here alert, and then we'll write here the name is, and then we'll print x. So because variable x is holding the value of name, then we'll use /n, and after that we'll write here the password is, and then we'll print the value of password. So we are done with it. We have printed the values of x and y here. Now Save it, and now we'll enter the values here. Let's say the name is Kaushal and the password is SimpliCode. The moment we click on this submit button, there will be a pop-up with a message. You can see it here. The name is Kaushal and the password is SimpliCode. So we printed these variables here along with the alert method. So this is how we can take input from the user in JavaScript. So we already discussed that we want to create a login form here with a specific name or password, right? Let's say we want the user to be allowed only if the password is SimpliCode. Otherwise, the user should be restricted from entering the web page. So this is a simple task. All we have to do here is we have to use the if-else control statements. So for that, we'll write here after this statement, we'll write here if, and then we'll write here, let's say we are doing it for password, right? So we'll write here y is equals to SimpliCode. Then we have the body of if, we'll write here alert login successful, and then we'll write here else. The statement will be alert wrong password. So we'll keep this line here. So what will happen is the moment we'll press the submit button, it will go to the if else statement and it will check if the password entered by the user matches the correct password or not. So if the password matches, it will print login successful. Otherwise, it will print the wrong password. And then finally, it will print the name entered by the user and the password as well. So let's save it and we'll write here the name as, let's say, Kaushal. And the password, let's say the password will be different this time. We'll write here Simplilearn. So this password does not matches the original password, right? The original password is SimpliCode. So what we are expecting is it will return wrong password here. So let's save it. The moment we press the submit button, you can see here we have a pop-up with message wrong password because the password we entered is Simplilearn. So if we press OK here, in the next message you can see the name is Kaushal and the password is Simplilearn. Fine. So let's do it again. This time we'll enter the correct password. We'll write here SimpliCode and we'll change the name as well. So let's say the name is Rahul. Submit it, and here you can see we have the message as login successful. We'll press OK, and here you can see the name is Rahul and the password is SimpliCode.
In this tutorial, we will see how we can use radio buttons to take input from users. Now, HTML radio buttons are created with the help of input tags, and the type for creating radio buttons is radio. We can use radio buttons on multiple occasions. For example, we can create a quiz question using a radio button. At one time, only a single radio button will be selected, and we can use it to find the correct answer. So today we will use radio buttons along with the ID attribute, and then we will create a JavaScript function to find the correct answer for a quiz. So without wasting any time, let's move on to the programming part. So first we will see how to add radio buttons to our HTML document. In the HTML file, we will write here input type is equals to radio, and then we have value is equals to, let's say, option 1, because we are using multiple options, right? We have multiple options for a single question, or we have multiple options here. So we'll write value as option 1, and then we'll write here the value we want to print. So we'll write here option 1. Fine. Save it, and we have a radio button over here. You can see we can check it, and it has no functionality till now. So let's add another button first. So what we'll do, we'll copy this line from here and we'll paste it, and then we'll change the option as option 2 and the value also as option 2. Right. Save it again, and here you can see we have 2 radio buttons now. Let's add a submit button here first. So we'll write here input type is equals to button, and then we have value is equal to submit. Save it, and here you can see we have a submit button as well. One thing you might notice here is we can check both the text boxes, right? We can check option 1 and option 2 both at the same time. So if we want to select only one checkbox at a time, we have to group them. So we'll use the name attribute and the same name for these two radio buttons. So the name will remain the same for both of these radio buttons. So we'll write here name is equals to, let's say, G1, and then we'll write here as well, we'll write here name is equals to G1. Now these two radio buttons belong to the same group. Save it, and now if you try to check both these boxes, you can see we can't do it now because we have grouped them, and now we can select only one radio button at a time, right? Now the next thing we are going to do is we'll move to a JavaScript file and we'll create a function there. So we'll move to a JavaScript file. So here's our JavaScript file and we'll create a function here. So let's do it first. So we'll write here function. Let's say the function name is fun1. Fine. And then we have the body of this function. So inside this function, we'll write here, we'll take two variables again for both the elements. So we'll write here var x, and then we'll write here document dot get element by id. Then we'll write here the id. So let's provide the id to those elements as well. So we'll write here before name we'll provide the id. So let's say the id for the first radio button is red1, and the id for the second one will be, let's say, red2. Fine. Save it, and we'll go back to our JavaScript file. We'll write here red1, and then we'll take another variable. We'll write here where y is equals to document dot get element by id method, and then we'll write here the id. So the id for the second radio button is red2. Fine. We don't need the value property here. Next up, we have to use the if else statement to print something, right? So we'll write here, we'll use the if else statement. We'll write here if, and then we have x dot checked is equals to true. Then it will return something, right? So we have a condition here as if x dot checked is equals to true. This particular statement will check if the radio button whose reference is available at variable x is selected or not. This dot checked is the property for a HTML element. If the radio button is checked, the output will be something. So let's add the output here as well. So the output will be, if the radio button is checked, will be like, we'll write here alert, then we'll write here the option selected is, then we will write here x dot value. So it will print the value of x as well. Now we have another condition here. We'll write here if y dot checked is equals to true, then it will return the option selected is, we'll write here plus y dot value. We are doing this because we have three different conditions here, right? If we select option 1, or if we select option 2, or if we are not selecting any of these options, right? So we have a else condition for that, and then we'll write here else. So here we have to write else if, and then we'll write here else, and the else part will print alert no option selected. Save it, and let's do one thing first. We'll call this function with the help of onClick method. So we'll go back to our HTML file and we'll write here in this element, we'll write here onClick, and we'll call this function onClick. So we'll write here fun1, and we have this function here. Save it, and here we are good to go. So if we move back to our JavaScript file, you can see here we have three conditions: either x is checked, or y is checked, or none of these are checked. So let's check the output now. We'll select option 1 first, we'll submit it, and here you can see we have the output as the option selected is option 1. Fine. Press OK, then we'll refresh this page and we'll select option 2, and now we'll press the submit button. So here you can see on selecting option 2, we have the output here as the option selected is option 2, right? So what if we are not selecting any of these two radio buttons? So click the submit button here and you can see we have the output as no option selected. So I hope you guys got it. Now the syntax will remain the same if we want to create a quiz. So next up what we are going to do is we are going to create a quiz. So here is the code if you want to create a quiz on your own. So we have a question here. We have a question as JavaScript was developed in the year. And then we have two options for it. We have 1998 as first option. So if we go here, you can see we have the first option is 1998 and then we have another option is 1995. Obviously we know the answer for it as 1995. We'll change the function name here as fun1 and save it. The JavaScript file for this code will look like this. So we have three conditions here again. If X is checked, then the output will be wrong answer and the correct answer is Y. And then we have another condition for Y. If Y is checked, or we can say if 1995 is checked, we'll have the output as right answer. And then we have another condition. If none of these radio buttons are checked, we have the output as no option selected. So let's see if the code works fine. So save it and we'll go to the browser. So we'll select option 1 first. So we'll select this 1998, submit it, and here you can see we have the output as wrong answer. The correct answer is 1995, right? We have the value of Y here. The value variable Y is holding is 1995. So we printed it over here and we have the output as Y dot value, which is 1990. So if we refresh it and if we select 1995 here, then we'll press the submit button and here you can see we have the output as right answer. Fine. Press OK and we are going to do it again. So this time we won't be selecting any of these options. We'll just click on this submit button and we have the output as no option selected. Fine. I hope you guys understood it. In the last few videos, we discussed the same thing, right? We saw how we could take input using text boxes and then we saw how we can take input using radio buttons. Today we are going to grab users input with the help of a select box in JavaScript. So without wasting any time, let's move on to the programming part directly. First, we'll see how to create a select box in HTML and then we'll move on to the JavaScript part. So let's move on to HTML and we'll create a select box here. If you guys remember, we used the input tag in the previous few videos for text boxes and radio buttons. But for the select box, the scenario is a bit different. We have to use the select element in HTML. So we'll write here select. So we have the select element here. We have to use this for select box in JavaScript or in HTML. So this select box is used to create a drop down list of some elements. So we can add as many elements as we want to that list. So we'll use the option tag for each component we are going to use. So the code goes like this. We'll start with the select tag and let's save this and see if it makes any changes to a browser. So you can see it on the browser that we have a button over here. Now we'll add options to this drop down list. For that we'll use the option tag. We'll write here option and let's say we have three options. We have three car manufacturers name. So let's say the first name is BMW. Then we'll copy this statement and we'll paste it again and again and then we'll change the name of manufacturers. So let's say another manufacturer is Audi and the last one is Ford. Fine. We have three manufacturers now. Save it and you can see it over here. We have a drop down list of three different elements. We have BMW, Audi and Ford here. Next up, we'll add a button. So a submit button as we did in the previous few videos. For that we will write here input type is equals to button and then we have value is equals to submit. Fine. Save it and we'll use a BR tag here. Save it now and here you can see we have a drop down list here. We have a select box here and then we have a submit button over here. Fine. Now we want to print the option we selected by clicking this submit button. For that we have to add functionality to our HTML document, right? So we'll follow the same steps as we did in the last video wherein we used the radio buttons and the text boxes. So we'll write here inside this input tag, we'll write here on click. So what we want to do is we want to call a function on clicking a submit button, right? So we'll write here a function name. So let's say the function name is selected, and we have to use the ID attribute in the select element, right? So we'll use the ID attribute here. We are not going to use a ID attribute inside the option tags, but we are going to use the ID attribute inside the select tag. So we'll write here ID is equals to, let's say, 1. Fine. So we have a ID here. Now we have to use the value property here as well. So I hope you guys remember the value property which we discussed in previous videos. So the value property is used to access these values, right? So we'll write here value is equals to BMW, and then for Audi the value will be Audi, and then for Ford the value will be Ford. Fine. Save it, and here we are done with the HTML document. So next up we'll create a function in the JavaScript file. So let's move on to the JavaScript file, and we'll create a function over here. So we'll write here function, and the function name is selected. Then we have the body of this function, right? So we are going to repeat the same steps. We are going to take a variable x which will hold the reference of select statement. So we'll write here document dot get element by id, and then we'll write here the id. So the id is 1. So now we have a variable x which holds the reference value of select element, right? Now we have used the document dot get element by id method to get the reference of the selected value. Next up, we'll use some properties for select element while printing the value with alert method. So if you guys remember in the previous video wherein we used the dot checked property for radio buttons. So similarly we have some more properties here for the select boxes as well. So let's have a look at them. So we'll write here alert, and then we have a property which will go like this. We'll write here x dot options, and then we have this brackets and dot value. So this options property here is a collection of all the options we have in a select tag. We have multiple options, right? This property works on arrays. So we have an array of all the elements and we can access any of them. For that we will write here the index value, right? So let's say the index value is 0. We want to print the element present at number 1. So we'll save it, and the moment we press submit button, you can see here we have the output as BMW. Now one thing to notice here is it doesn't matter which option the user chooses, the output will remain BMW for all those cases because we are using the first element of the array. So no matter which option the user is selecting, the message will be there with the value present at index 0. So we can say now that we can't use static values, right? We can't use 0, 1 or 2 here because we want to provide the value dynamically, because we have 3 different values here and we want to print the value which the user selected, not the one present at index 0, 1 or 2. So for that we have another property here. We have to write here x dot selected index, and one thing you have to remember is we have to write here x dot selected index or any variable we are using here. So we are good to go now. Save it, and if we press submit now while clicking on BMW, so our first option is BMW, let's press the submit button, and here you can see we have the output as BMW. And next up we'll be selecting Audi and we'll press submit. So here you can see we have the output as Audi now. And finally we have Ford as well, so let's check it as well. So press the submit button and here you can see we have the output as Ford. So this is how we can take inputs in JavaScript from drop-down lists. Next up, we'll go through a simple program as we did in the last video, wherein we'll create a quiz question and we'll check if the option selected by the user is correct or not. So this is the code for that. So we have the question here as JavaScript was developed by. We are using another question different from the one we used in the last video. So we know who developed JavaScript, right? So we have a question here, JavaScript was developed by, and then we have two options for the same question. The first one is Brendan Eich and the second one is Guido van Rossum. So then we have the ID as 1 for the select element and the values are also the same. Then we have a button over here which will call function 1 on clicking. And if we move to a JavaScript file, we can see here we have a function fun1 and then we have a variable x which holds the reference of value returned by document.getElement by ID method. And then we use this value. So we have used here x.options. So what we are doing is we are basically checking that if the selected value is equals to Brendan Eich or not. If the value is equal to Brendan Eich, then the output will be the answer is correct. Else the output will be the answer is wrong. So let's save it and we'll move back to HTML file and we'll save this file as well. So now here you can see we have a question over here and we have a select box which has two options, Brendan Eich and Guido van Rossum, right? So let's select Brendan Eich first, press the submit button and here you can see it says the answer is correct. Fine. Next up we are going to use Guido van Rossum and we are going to press submit button. So here you can see the answer is wrong. We are going to discuss something different. Before going deep into this topic, let's recall events in JavaScript. So the simple definition of an event states that something that happens. So when we manipulate an HTML document in JavaScript, we try to do something on the web page, right? So several events take place on a website, like the user hovers over a specific element or clicks on an element, or pressing a key in the website can also refer to events. Or we can say submitting a form or playing a video also refers to the same thing. So we are using the onClick event for the past few videos wherein we discussed that a specific task would be performed on clicking a particular button. What we did was we were just calling a function by clicking a button in HTML. So clicking a button is also an event, right? And the function that will be called upon clicking the button is known as event handler, because that function is basically asking the computer to perform a particular task on clicking the button. So like the onClick event, we have some more exciting events present in HTML which helps us make a web page more interactive and responsive as well. So we can do it with the help of JavaScript. So we'll go through two such events today, the onMouseOver event and the onMouseOut event. So the onMouseOver event will perform a task when the user takes the mouse cursor on that element. Similarly, the onMouseOut event also performs a task when the user takes the mouse cursor away from that element. So for example, let's suppose we have an image present in our web page and we want to change the size of that image when the user takes the mouse cursor over that image. And the image should get back to its previous size when the user takes away the cursor. So what's basically happening is when the user is taking its mouse over the image or picture, the picture size will increase, and on taking the mouse cursor away from the image, the size will get back to its default size. So let's do it once and we'll see how these events work within an HTML document. So first of all, let's add an image to the HTML file. We'll use the img tag for that and we'll have to provide the path for the image, right? So we'll write here in a HTML file, we'll add an image here. So we'll write here img and then we have to provide the source, and the images are stored inside the images folder in this system. So we'll write here the image name. So we have provided the path here. Next up, what we'll do is we'll use the alt attribute. So we'll write here in the alt, we'll write here SimpliCode. Fine. Save it. And here you can see we have an image over a browser, but the image size is quite large, right? So we'll limit the size of this image using the width property. So what we'll do is we'll write here width, and let's say the width of the image will be 250 pixels. Save it. And now you can see we have an image over here. The image is in its normal size. So this is the image. So we have this image over here, and next thing what we are going to do is we are going to increase the size of this picture on taking the mouse cursor over this image. So what will happen is when we take our mouse cursor here, the picture size will increase. So for that we have to use the on mouse over property, or we can say the on mouse over event. So what we'll do is we'll write here on mouse over, and we'll call a function on taking the mouse cursor over this image. So we'll write here change size. So we'll declare it in a JavaScript file, and we'll call this function on taking the mouse cursor over this picture. So next thing we are going to do is we are going to move to a JavaScript file, and we'll define this change size function there. So let's go to the JavaScript part. We'll go to a JS file and we'll write here, we'll declare a function first. So we'll write here function change size, and then we have the body of this function. So we can do it without taking any variable. Like in the previous videos we were taking a variable to store the reference of the ID attribute. So this time we are going to use the document.getElementById, but we are not going to use a separate variable for storing the reference. So we'll write here document.getElementById, and we haven't provided the ID yet. So let's do one thing, let's move back to a HTML file, and we'll use the ID attribute here as well inside the img tag. We'll write here ID. Let's say the ID is img1. Fine, save it, and we'll write here inside the JS file, we'll give the ID here as well. So we have the ID as img1. Save it, and the next thing we are going to do is we are going to use the style property with this document.getElementById method. So we'll write here dot style, and then we'll write here dot width, and then we'll specify the width. So we'll write here the width as, let's say, 500 pixels. The default width is 250 pixels, right? So save it, and let's see if it's working fine or not. So here is the image on the browser, and we'll take the mouse cursor over the image, and you can see the change in the size of this picture. So JavaScript makes it easy to do such tasks. Now you might have noticed that the image's size remains the same once the user takes the mouse cursor away from the image, right? So the image size is changed. Let me zoom out a little bit so it will be easy for you guys. So what we'll do is we'll refresh this page, and here you can see on taking the mouse cursor over this image, the change in the size of this particular picture. So now the image size is 500 pixel. Now the image size is not getting back to its original size. Like what we did was we used the on mouse over event, and the image size is changing, and that's working totally fine. So the next thing we are going to do is we are going to use the on mouse out event, and what will happen is the image size will get back to its default size, like which is the 250 pixel. So for that we'll use another function. So first we have to use the on mouse out event here. So we'll write here on mouse out, and we have to create another function. So we'll write here change size to. So this will be our function name. Save it, and here we have to create another function in the JavaScript file. So we'll write here function change size, and the function name is change size to. Then we have the body of this function, and we'll use the document.getElementById method. The ID is same, which is img1, and then we are going to use the style property again, and this time we'll specify the width as 250 pixel. So this is the default size of our image. Save it. So what we did is we created a function that will be called when the user takes away the mouse cursor from the picture, and the image size will be changed to 250 pixels, which was the initial size of the image. So save it, and now you can see here on the browser the image size is changing on taking the mouse cursor over the image. The image size is 500 pixel now, and on taking the mouse cursor away from the image is getting back to its default size, right? So you can see the change here So this is how we can use these events to make a web page more interactive and attractive as well. Next up, we'll go through another example wherein we will change the image on the mouse over event, and the default image will be shown on taking the cursor away from the image. So this image will change on taking the mouse cursor over it, and again it will get back to the default image on taking the mouse cursor away from the image. So guys, here's the code for the same, and what will happen is the image will change on taking the mouse cursor over it and gets back to the default on taking the cursor away. So guys, the HTML part will remain the same, wherein we use the img tag to add an image, and then we have two functions, one for the on mouse over and another for the on mouse out event. So in the JavaScript file, we defined the two functions here. So you can see the function 1 is change image and the function 2 is change image 2. So what's happening is we are using the get element by id method again, and this time we are using the src attribute, and what we are doing is we are changing the source of image. Like we are using here the simplilearn.png. So this is our image saved in the particular folder inside the images folder, and in the next function what we are doing is we are again changing the image to the default image. So we have used the simplicode.png image here. So what will happen is the default image will be replaced by this image when this function is called, and the other function here will again replace the new image with the default one. So let's take a look at the output and save it. So here you can see on taking mouse cursor over this image, you can see the change. So this is the image we want to change. So on taking the mouse cursor away from this image, you can see the image gets back to the default one. You can see the image is changing and it's quite responsive and attractive. So this is how we can use these events in Java. You can see we have an image slider over here. The images present inside this box keep on changing. We can also click on these radio buttons to go over a specific image. If we click on this last radio button, you can see we are moving to that particular image. Now suppose you go through the home page of any website like Amazon or Flipkart, you will notice that these websites contain such image sliders at the top for different type of sales and offers going on, right? That looks quite nice. So we'll do something interesting in today's video. We'll go over some specific animations like fading of an image on several events. We'll see how easy it is to make those style changes in JavaScript, which we can't do with CSS or HTML. We are particularly talking about style changes during events. So talking about style changes, we have done it in the past using CSS and HTML and JavaScript of course. So guys, we generally say that JavaScript is used to make a web page more interactive, right? To make a web page more interactive or engaging, we have to do something nice to it. So adding fade in and fade out animations to a picture makes the web page more engaging to the user. So what we'll do today is we'll take an image and use specific JavaScript properties to make changes in that image. Let's move on to the VS Code and you will understand it much better. Now let's add an image to the web page first. So we have a picture on our computer and we'll add it. So what we'll do is we'll write here img src source will be html.png, and the next thing we'll be using the alt attribute. We'll write here, let's say JavaScript. So we can take any random image. We are doing this for experimental purpose only. So what we'll do next is we'll close this img tag, we'll save it, and here you can see we have an image over here. We'll reduce the size, and so this is the perfect size, I guess. Now what we'll do next is we'll use the ID attribute as well because we need to access this particular image. So let's say the ID is img. Fine. Now here we have an image and we have two possibilities to perform those animations. Either we can add two buttons and add functionality to them, or we can use the on mouse over and on mouse out events. So we'll use two buttons for now, and then we'll use the on mouse over and on mouse out events to do the same task. Now let's add two buttons here. What we'll do is we'll write here input type is equals to button, and then we'll write here value. Value will be, let's say, fade in for first button, and we'll use the on click event. Fine. So we'll write here on click and we'll call a function on clicking this particular button. So this will be a function name fade in. Now we'll
do similar thing again. We'll copy paste it and we'll change certain values here. We'll write here fade out and we'll call a different function. So we'll write here fade out. Fine. Now save it, and you can see we have two buttons over here, fade in and fade out. So nothing is happening on clicking over these buttons. We can change the size of this image using CSS, right? So we'll use CSS here only. We'll write here class is equals to, let's say, size, and we'll use the style tag here. We'll write here dot size, and inside this we'll write width is equals to 50 pixels, let's say, and the height will be 50 pixels as well. Fine, save it, and you can see the image is pretty small right now. So what we'll do is we'll write here 250 instead of 50. Save it now, and you can see it's working fine, I guess. The size is decent. Let's change it to 300. Fine. So we have to keep these things in mind, like what size we want for our image, and we can use CSS for that, right? That's quite easy. What we did is we defined a class. We use the class attribute here inside the img tag, and we have defined it using the style tag over here. We are not using any separate CSS file for that. So save it, and you can see we have an image over here with decent size, and then we have two buttons, fade in and fade out. Now the next task for us is to add functionality to these buttons. We'll move on to the JavaScript file and create our functions there. So this is our JavaScript file. We'll create a function here. Let's say the function name is fade in. So this is the first function, and then we have the body of this function. Now the next thing is to use the style property to fade this image. Let's talk about it in detail. We need to access this image, right? So we'll use the document.getElementById method to access the image. We have already used the ID attribute in the HTML file. So what we'll do here is we'll write here document.getElementById, and the ID is img. Fine. Now we have to use the style property. The style property is used to add styling to any particular element or event with the help of JavaScript. We can do it with CSS, but we want to add styling as a functionality, right? This means that we want to style an element or image by clicking a button. For that, we have to use the style property here in our JavaScript file. So we'll write here style. Now the next and the last thing is fading the image. Now we have a term named opacity in programming. Opacity refers to the fact of being opaque. In programming, if the value of opacity is 1, then we can't see through the image, like making an image transparent. And if the value is 0, we can see through that image, or we can say that the image will totally disappear if the value is 0. So let's try it out here, and you will understand it. So what we'll do is we'll write here style.opacity is equals to 0. Now save it and click on this fade in button. Click on this fade in button, and you can see the image disappears by clicking the fade in button. Now we'll add functionality to this fade out button as well. For that, what we have to do is we have to create another function here. So the function name will be fade out, and then we have the body of this function. The working will remain the same. We'll again use the document.getElementById method. We'll again use the img as id. We'll write here .style.opacity. Now what we want is we want to bring back our image, right? So we'll write here 1. Now here the values are 0 and 1 respectively for fade in and fade out functions. Let's check the output here. Save it. Click on this fade in button, and you can see the image totally disappears. And on clicking the fade out button, you can see the image is here again. Now to actually make the image a slight fade, let's say we don't want the image to be disappeared completely. What we want is a slight fade in an image. Now what we have to do is we have to choose a value between 0 and 1.
like for 0 it totally disappears, right? If we write here 0.5, save it now and click on fade in, you can see the image fades slightly. So this is how we can use the fade in and fade out animations in JavaScript, and it will be totally fine if we write here 0.1 as well. Save it, and if you click on this fade in button, you can see we have this image over here still, but we can say it's almost transparent or disappearing. You can see it's over here. Maybe it's visible or maybe not, but if you write here 0.3 or something like that and now click on this fade in button, you can see we can see this image, but the image is faded, right? So this is how we can use the fade in and fade out animations in JavaScript. Now we can do the same thing using on mouse over and on mouse out events in JavaScript. We have to make some more minor changes in a HTML file only. Instead of using these buttons, we'll use the on mouse over and on mouse out events inside the img tag. So what we'll do is, let's do it as well. We'll move to our HTML file and we'll comment these two lines. So we are done with it. Now the next thing we'll do is we'll use the on mouse over and on mouse out event, right? So we'll write here on mouse over first, and we'll call the fade in function on taking the mouse cursor over the image, and the second event will be on mouse out. So we'll write here on mouse out and we'll call the fade out function, fine, on taking the mouse cursor away from the image. Save it, and you can see we don't have any buttons over here now. Now on taking the mouse cursor over this image, you can see the image fades a bit, and on taking the mouse cursor away from the image, you can see we have the original image here. So this is how we can make fade in and fade out animations work in JavaScript. You might hear that browsers do not support this method of using fade in and fade out animations in JavaScript. In my case, I have checked with 3-4 different browsers like Microsoft Edge, Firefox, Chrome and Internet Explorer. So it is working totally fine. I want you guys to check if it is working or not with the browsers you have on your computer. If not, then do let us know in the comments and we'll figure it out. Make sure that you have the latest version of whichever browser you are using. The fade in and fade out effect in JavaScript was easy to use. All we have to do is to use the style property with opacity in between 0 and 1. Quite a simple task, right? Now in this video, we'll see another animation effect in which we'll change the size of an image by hovering over that. We see such animations in many e-commerce websites where if we take the mouse cursor over any product, the size increases. So let's do it here. It's a simple task. We'll add an image to our HTML file first. So we'll write here img, and the source will be, we have an image named as coffee.png in our system, and then we have the id attribute. The id will be, let's say, img, and then we'll use the alt attribute here. We'll write here coffee. Let's assume that this is a product of any e-commerce website and we want to increase the size of this product on hovering over that. So the next thing we'll be doing here is we'll be defining the width. So let's say the width will be 200 pixel for this particular image, and then we'll use certain events here. So we'll use the on mouse over. So on taking the mouse cursor over, we want to increase the size of this image, right? And on taking the mouse cursor away, we want to decrease the size, right? So we have used these two functions. We'll define these functions in our JavaScript file. So we are done with this img tag. Save it, and you can see we have an image over here in a browser. So we are done with it. We have the default size of this image as 200 pixels. We can change it here. We can make it 300 or 400 or any size we want. So you can see the image size change if we write here 300 instead of 200. So for now we'll be using 200. That's fine, I guess. So what we want is we want to increase the size of this image by taking the mouse cursor over it, right? And the size will be back to normal if we take the cursor away from the image. So for that, we have to define these two functions, increase and decrease. So let's define them in a JavaScript file. What we'll do is we'll first write here function, and we'll define function increase. Then we have the body of this function, and we'll write here document dot get element by id. The id is img, and we'll write here dot style dot width is equals to, we can't write here 400 pixels simply, it will throw an error. You can see a red line over here. So what we have to do is we have to write this inside single inverted commas, right? Save it, and on taking the mouse cursor over the image, you can see the image size increases, but it's not getting back to its original size because we haven't declared the decrease function yet. Let's declare the decrease function as well. So what we'll do is we'll again use the same logic. We'll write here function decrease, and inside the body we'll write document dot get element by id. We'll write here img dot style dot width is equals to, the width let's say will be default, so the width will be 200 pixels. We'll write here 200 pixels, and the decrease function will make the picture get back to its original size, that is 200 pixels. So save it, and you can see here on the browser that the image is zooming in and out on specific mouse events. That is one of the most easiest tasks to do in JavaScript. All we had to do is we had to define two functions, a function increase and the other one for decreasing the size. So the function increase will increase the size by 200 pixels, and the function decrease will get the image back to its original form. Fine. Now there is an older method of changing the size of an image using the setInterval method. HTML5 documents no longer support this method. So suppose that we want the size of the image to grow gradually. Like after every 10 milliseconds, the size should increase up to a certain level. All we have to do is to use the setInterval method. We are all aware of this concept in JavaScript. So let's take a look at the HTML part. So here's the HTML part, which is the same as we used for the previous program. Not even a single change here. You can see we have the image source as coffee.png. Then we have the ID as img1. Then we have used two mouse over events, one to increase the size and the other one to decrease the size. And then we have the width as 100. We have changed the width here. The initial width will be 100, and we'll notice that the initial image size is smaller than the one we used in the previous program. Now the JavaScript file will look different. Let's move there first. So here's the JavaScript part, and we have three variables here: width, addition, and interval ID. Now the initial value of width is the same as that of image, which is 100, and then we have the variable addition, which will be responsible for the increment of the size, as we want the size to be incremented by 2 pixels after every 10 milliseconds, right? The following variable is interval ID, which we'll need later on while using the setInterval method. Now we have two functions over here, the increase function and the decrease function. So these are the two functions we have in a JavaScript file. Inside the increase function, we have used the setInterval method. You can see here we have the setInterval method, and we have called the zoom in function after every 10 milliseconds. So it will call the zoom in functions again and again after 10 milliseconds. So if we want to make it 1 second, we have to write here 1000, right? We are already aware of this concept, so we are using milliseconds for now. Now if we remove this clear interval method from here, then the zoom in and zoom out effect will not work correctly in between. We'll try it later. So same as the case for decrease function as well, and it will call the zoom out function after every 10 milliseconds, right? So we have to define these two functions as well. So here are the functions zoom in and zoom out. So let's take a look at the zoom in function first. The zoom in function is actually responsible for the increment in the size of the image. If the width is less than 200, let's suppose the initial width is 100, which is less than 200, right? Then what will happen is the value of width will be increased by width plus addition. It will be increased by 2. So it will check if the width is less than 100, the value will be 102. Then 104, 6, 8, 10 up to 200. And then the value will be assigned to the style property to increase the size. So this statement is we are using for a long time now. So what we are doing is we are assigning the value of this width to this style property. And then we have used the console.log to check the increase in width. Now the else statement will stop the setInterval function, and the increment in image size will be stopped as soon as it reaches the 200 mark. For the value of width as 200, the setInterval function will stop. Same as the case for zoom out function, which will decrease the size of the image until the size reaches 0. The size will be reduced by 2 after every 10 milliseconds. The logic remains the same. What we are doing is we are using here minus instead of plus, and we are checking if the value of width is greater than 100. Fine. So let's check the output of this program, save it, and we'll open this file with live server. We'll click on live server. Now here we are on the browser and take the mouse cursor over the image. Oh, it's not working. The reason behind it is this method is not supported by the current version of HTML. To make this program work, we have to put our browser in quirk mode. Now for that, we have to do a simple task. We have to go to a HTML file and we have to remove this particular statement. We have to remove this doc type as HTML. Remove it. Now this quirk mode is used to make older websites compatible with the browser. If your program doesn't work sometimes, do check this out by removing doc type from your HTML file. Sometimes it happens that a particular method or a particular type of program doesn't support in your browser. So do check this method out. Try running your program in quirk mode and maybe it will work. So let's check the output now. See, on taking the mouse cursor over here, the image size increases gradually, and on taking the mouse cursor away, the size decreases. It looks nice, right? Now imagine you are working on an e-commerce website and you want to make your website more interactive. Then you can put this effect over products and it will look nicer, right? So we have already mentioned it that what if we remove this clear interval method. So we'll move to a JavaScript file and we'll see what if we remove this particular clear interval method from here. So we'll remove these clear interval methods. We'll remove this one and this one. Save it now, and you can see there is something wrong on taking the mouse cursor over this image. So you can see the image is shaking slightly, right? Now this is because the clear interval method does not stop the set interval method on calling the increase and decrease function every time. So this is how we can make our web pages more beautiful and interactive in JavaScript. So let me give you a simple example of drag and drop elements first. Here we have two different folders. One is where we have all our JavaScript and HTML files we have worked on till today. And the other one is an empty folder with no file at all. Now, drag and drop means taking something from one place and leaving it at another location. For example, select a file from this folder. So let's say we are selecting this file and try dragging this file from here. You can see we have this file stuck with our mouse cursor. So wherever we are taking our mouse cursor, the file is going with it. So we can place it anywhere until the left button of our mouse is clicked. And the moment we unclick the left mouse button or put our finger away from the mouse is where the file will be located from now on. So if we move this file here and if we put away our finger from the left button, so you can see the file is located in this folder now. So the file will now move to this new folder, and this refers to drag and drop in real life or the computer world, we can say. Quite an easy task, right? We already know much about it. Now what we'll do today is we'll try to achieve this same thing using JavaScript. So let me close these two tabs for now. Now let's start with the programming part and we'll see what we can do to achieve this drag and drop elements in JavaScript. First of all, we'll try to do some part with the HTML and CSS in which we'll add some specific space in our web page, like 2 boxes or something sort of that, so that it'll become easy for us to track the drag and drop effect. So let's write some code now. Enough of this theoretical part we did. Now what we'll do is we'll write here inside the body tag. So we'll take 3 divs for this particular tutorial. So we'll write here class is equals to box. What we are doing is we are creating 3 boxes over here. So we'll close this div and we'll copy this whole statement from here and we'll paste it twice again. Now what we are doing is we are adding 3 boxes to a web page. So we have added 3 div tags here. We can say 3 boxes as well. So let's add some style so that we can identify the 3 boxes. What we'll do is we'll use inline CSS, or we can say we are defining our CSS part in this particular HTML document. We are not going to use a separate CSS file for styling. So what we'll do is we'll move to our head part and we'll write here style. So this style tag is what we are using for our CSS styling. Now our primary focus will be on the JavaScript part. So the styling will be limited. So what we'll do here is we'll define this box class. We'll write here dot box, and inside this we'll use some CSS properties. So we'll write here float, and we'll give the value as left. Then we'll write here background color, and the background color is, let's say, this one. So the next thing we'll be doing here is we'll be defining the width and the height. So let's say the width is 400 pixel and the height will also be 400 pixel. Fine. Now the next thing will be margin. So we'll write here margin, and let's say the margin is 10 pixels. Then we'll use padding as well. We'll use the padding as 10 pixels. Next up, we'll write here border. So the border will be 1 pixel thin, basically a thin border. So we'll write here solid. We'll use the solid border, and the border color will be, let's say, black. Fine. Save it. And here you can see we have 3 boxes over here in a web page. Next up, we'll add an image to the first container so that we can drag that image from this container to other 2 containers. So the code for that is quite easy. We'll write here inside this first div tag. We'll use the img tag to add an image. We'll write here class as image, and the image source will be, let's say, j1.png. so this is a picture in a folder. We'll write here draggable is equals to true, and then we'll write the width of image will be, let's say, 300, and the height will also be 300. Fine. Now save it, and here you can see we have an image over here inside the first container of a web page. Now you might notice here that we have used the draggable property, or the draggable attribute we can say. So this draggable attribute here indicates if a particular element can be dragged or not. It can either be true if we want the element to be dragged, or false if we don't want it to be dragged freely. Now images can be dragged by default in modern JavaScript, so we can drag this image if we don't include this property as well. Now if you want to see how this property actually works, we have to write here false for now. Save it, and if you try to drag this image now, you can see we are not able to drag this particular image inside a browser. So this is how the draggable attribute actually works. Now what we'll do is we'll write here true again, because we want to drag this image and this will be required. So we can drag this image now, you can see. Now we'll leave the other 2 containers empty so that we can drag and drop the image from container 1 to the other 2 containers. Now you can see that the image is not well structured inside the container on the browser. You can see the image is not centered as well. So we'll apply some style to this image as well. So what we'll do is we'll leave margin here from the left and the top of this image so that the image will be well structured or centered, we can say. So we'll write here dot image, because this is the class of our image, and then we'll write here margin top as 50 pixels and margin left as 50 pixels. Fine. Save it now, and here you can see we have an image in the center of the container. So this is how we can use HTML and CSS to style an image or to center it in the middle of a container. So we are done with the HTML and CSS part. Now we'll do nothing more with the CSS to make this video more easy and understandable for everyone, because doing so much styling and all might lead to confusion for you guys. So let's move on to the JavaScript part quickly, which is no doubt the most essential part of this tutorial. So we'll move to a JavaScript file. Now before we begin, let's discuss something. The logic is simple. We have to drag this image from here and drop it in another box here. Right, we have to drag it from here, we have to drop it here. The logic seems easy to speak, right? So let's start with the coding part and we'll see things in between. Now, first thing first, we need to access 2 HTML elements for this, the box and the image inside it, right? So for that, we can either use the ID attribute, we can use the tag name or the class name method as well, or we can also use the query selector method. It depends on you totally what you want to do here. For now, we'll use the class name method to access both the elements. So what we'll do is we'll write here const image is equals to document dot get element by class name, and the class name for image is image, and we'll write here again const box is equals to document dot get element by class name, and the class name is box. Fine. The image variable holds the image tag which we used in the HTML file, and the boxes variable holds all the 3 boxes within it. So what we'll do is we'll write here const boxes instead of box. Next up, we'll add event listeners to our JavaScript file. Now we have already been through event listeners in the previous videos. So event listeners are predefined events used to perform some specific task in JavaScript. So here we need 2 event listeners, drag start and drag end. Now the drag start event will call a function. That function will create separately, and the drag end event will also call a function. So we'll create those functions separately. First of all, we'll add events. So we'll write here image dot add event listener, and we'll write here drag start, and the function name will be drag start. Fine. So you can see the difference between the function name and the event name. Now next up, we'll write here image dot add event listener. We'll write here drag end, and the function name will be drag end. Fine. Now remember that we are using these events on the image only for now to drag this particular image from one place to another. We could have done it on the HTML file as well, wherein we can include these events inside the img tag like we were doing in the earlier videos, but it can be confusing because we have to include so many functions there, which is a bit confusing. Now moving ahead, we'll create these 2 functions now, the drag start and the drag end function. So the drag start function will obviously start the dragging part, and the drag end function will stop it. So for that, we'll write here function drag start, and then we have the body of this function. Similarly, we'll create another function which will be drag end, and we have these 2 functions here. One will start the dragging event and the other one will end the event. For your ease, we'll write here for now console.log, and we'll see when the functions are being called. Fine. So we'll write here console.log, and inside this we'll write dragging, and here we'll write console.log and dragged. Fine. So let's understand the working. Save it, and we'll open our console. So let me zoom this for you. Now what we'll do is we'll open our console, and here you can see it says add event listener is not a function. So we have done something wrong here. Now what we'll do is we'll check what we have done wrong in a JavaScript file. So is nothing wrong here, but let's do one thing. Let's try to access this image with the help of document.getElement by ID method instead of this class name method. So for that, we have to move to a HTML file, and we have to write ID as, let's say, img1. Fine. Save it here, and we'll move back to a JavaScript file, and we'll write here instead of document.getElements by class name, we'll write here document.getElement by ID, and the ID we have given is img1. Fine. Save it now, move back to console, and here you can see the error is gone. So it was because of the document.getElements by class name method. Now once you start dragging this image, the drag start function will be called, and you can see here it says dragging, right? The drag end function will be called once we leave the image somewhere. So if we leave this image here, you can see it says dragged over here. Fine. So these 2 functions are called when we try to drag an image and when we leave an image anywhere in the web page. So these 2 functions are working totally fine. Now we want to drag this image in such a way that there remains nothing left behind in the first box. So the first box should be empty. Right now, if we are dragging this image, you can see the image is still there in the first box, and we don't want that, right? So for that, we have to move to a CSS file, or we can say we have to add a style property in the CSS part. So what we'll do is we'll move to a HTML file and we'll write here, after this image, we'll write here dot invisible, and we'll write here display is, let's say, none. Fine. Save it now. Now this invisible property will make the space empty. It will make the space in the first container empty after dragging the image from that. So to give this class to the image, what we have to do is we have to write inside the drag start function. Fine. So what we'll do here is we'll remove this console.log first, and we'll write here this dot class name is equals to invisible. Fine. Now save this HTML file, save this JavaScript file, and let's try to drag the image now. You can see on dragging the image, it becomes completely invisible. So we don't want that to happen. What we want is we want this image to disappear from the first box with a minimal delay. So what we'll do is we'll use the set timeout method for that. We have already been through this method. So what we'll do is we'll write here inside this drag start function set timeout, and inside this set timeout method we'll use a callback function. So we'll write here this, and we'll cut this piece of code from here and we'll paste it inside this set timeout method, and the time will be 0 because we want minimal delay. Right now this will work totally fine. Save it and move to console. So we'll open console, and here you can see now this is working totally fine. On dragging this image, there's nothing left behind in the first container, so this is working totally fine. Obviously the image is invisible once we leave the mouse button. So for that we have to write something inside the drag and function. So let's do it here as well. What we'll do here is we'll write here this dot class name is equals to image. Fine. So this will be the class name. Save it now, move to console. Here you can see it's working totally fine now. It's not completely draggable, but you can see it's not invisible anymore on leaving the mouse button. So it is working totally fine. I hope you guys understood it till now. Next up, we'll add some more events to the boxes as well. So till now we have been using events for the image only. Now we'll add events to the boxes as well. So for all the boxes, we have to loop through them and we have to use certain functions. So what we'll do is we'll use the for of loop to loop through the boxes, and let's do it here first. So we'll write here for let box of boxes. So we'll loop through all the boxes. We'll write here box dot add event listener, and we'll write here we'll use an event which is drag over, and we'll create a function for this as well. So we'll write here drag over in camel. So we'll copy this for 3 more times because we'll be adding 3 more events here. So instead of drag over, we'll write here drag enter for the image to enter in another container. So we'll write here drag enter as well, and here we have to write small e instead of capital E. So the next event will be drag leave, and we'll write here drag leave. Fine. The last will be drop, and the function name will also be drop. Fine. Save it now, and it will create no change in the web page. So here we are adding 4 different events to the boxes for 4 different scenarios. Now we have to declare these functions to achieve the drag and drop part altogether. So you can save it once and check on the browser. You can see it says drag over is not defined. And what we'll do is we'll define these functions now as well. So we have 4 functions over here. So we'll define all the 4 first. So we'll write here function drag over, and then we have the body of this function. Then we'll write function drag enter. Then we'll write here function drag leave, and finally we have function drop. Right. So we'll write here function drop, and then we have the body of this function. So these are our 4 functions, and there's one more thing we have to do, and we are almost done with the video. So let's start defining these functions and we can see what we can do with them. We can also see the functioning of these functions real quick. What we'll do is we'll again use console.log and write something inside to check when these functions are being triggered. So we'll write here console.log. For the over function we'll write over. For the drag enter we'll write console.log enter. For leave we'll write console.log leave, and for drop we'll write console.log drop. Fine. So save it and go to the console. Now start dragging this image, and you can see the different functions being triggered on various events. You can see when we take this image over another container, the drag over function is being called. When we take it out, the leave function was called, and then the enter function because the image entered in a new container. So this is how these functions actually work. Now the drop function will not even trigger. We'll see why. So now we have to cancel the default working of this drag over function, drag enter function, and the drag leave function, because we want to assign a particular task to the drop function and we don't want them to follow their default behavior. So what we'll do is we'll use the event listener parameter for it along with the prevent default method. So let's do it first and then I'll explain it to you. We'll write here inside the drag over function, we'll write here e. So e will be the parameter. We'll write here e dot prevent default. Fine. We'll do the same for drag enter and drag leave, and we'll pass e as the parameter for both the functions as well. Save it now and we'll move back to a console and start dragging the image, and you can see the drop function is being called now. So this is why we have used the prevent default method. This prevent default method is used to prevent the browser from executing the default action of the selected element. Next up, we'll move to the drop function quickly and we'll see here. So here we are inside the drop function. Now, if you are changing the style of boxes on certain events like drag enter and drag leave, then remember to change the styling back to the original one while dropping the image to another container. So for that, we have to use the class name again. So what we'll do is we'll write here this dot class name is equals to box, and we are good to go. So the last thing we are left with is the image on the new box. For that, we have to append the image to a box on dropping it, right? So what we can do is we can write here this dot append and we'll pass image as a parameter now. Fine. So the image here is the class name and it will append this image to the box. Save it, go to the browser, close this console here. Now start dragging this image, drop it here, and you can see we are good to go now. We can drag an image from anywhere and we can drop it on any of these containers. We can drop it here, we can drop it back and forth, we can do anything. Like we can add one more container here. For that, what we have to do is we have to move to a HTML file, we have to copy this line and we have to paste it 2 times, let's say. Now here you can see we have 5 containers. We can drag this image and drop it on any of these. So it is working totally fine. And this is how the drag and drop elements in JavaScript actually works.
So that wraps today's session on JavaScript. We hope you had a lot to learn and will be on the lookout for any suggestion or doubts in the comment section below. So if you have any queries, you know what to do. Hope to catch you guys back in the next part. Thank you so much for being here today. Stay tuned to SimpliCode and keep coding.